Heavenly Father, today we put on the full armor to protect us against attack. We put on the belt of truth to protect against lies and deception. We put on the breastplate of righteousness to protect our hearts from the temptations. We put the gospel of peace on our feet to walk in your light, peace, and freedom with the Holy Spirit. We rebuke anxious thoughts. We take up your shield of faith for protection to block and destroy all the darts and threats thrown at us by the enemy. We put on the helmet of salvation to cover our minds and thoughts, reminding us that we are children of a mighty King. We are forgiven, set free, saved by the blood of Jesus. We take up the sword of the Spirit, your living word, that has the power to demolish strongholds and is sharper than any double-edged sword. We come to you, Lord, in prayer daily. In Jesus' mighty name we pray. Amen. What's up, you guys? Welcome to The Imagination. I'm your host, Emma, and today I'm honored to introduce you all to MKUltra, child trafficking, and Milgram Experiment survivor and whistleblower, human rights activist, organic gardener, camping lover, hiker, fisherwoman, frisbee golf extraordinaire, home birth and midwife advocate, published author and writer, podcaster, YouTuber, janitorial service subcontractor, and an incredible inspiration to the survivor movement and community, Carol Stanhope. A little bit about Carol's testimony and what we will be diving into today if you guys are new to her story. Carol's father came to the US in 1939 as an immigrant at the age of 17 and was intercepted by the OSS, which was the former CIA, at Boston Harbor, where they gave him an ultimatum to participate as an asset or be deported back to Finland. Her father chose the former as he didn't want to be conscripted to the Finnish army. When the OSS learned of his rare Rh-negative blood type and Norse lineage, they forcibly enlisted him in the Merchant Marines, where his job was to safeguard precious gems and metals. They then used him in various drug mule positions in Thailand and Portugal. He eventually met Carol's mother in Chicago in the early 1950s, and Carol was born in Minnesota in 1962, and her family was absorbed into the intelligence agency by proxy. In 1967, at just 5 years of age, Carol's father offered her up to MKUltra, Monarch, and Project Bluebird, as well as to Dr. Stanley Milgram's Cyranoid experiments. These took place at Duluth Air Force Base and the University of Minnesota. The protocols Carol was subjected to were electroshock treatments, sensory deprivation, forced ingestion of urine, sexual abuse, and more. This past January, Carol discovered the stimoceiver and multi-lead needle electrodes that were implanted in her brain by Stanley Milgram's Yale colleague, Dr. Jose Delgado. The electrodes bulge out of her skull and are visible on her shaved head. Carol was also used in exploitation material in the 1970s and had to escape from a baby breeding program in the 1980s. She eventually participated in a UN ladies group called Persons Against Non-State Torture. 2 UN nurses helped her deprogram in the mid to late 2000s and mentored her to become an activist and advocate. Carol released a documentary in 2018, an autobiography in 2021, and is currently in the process of writing her second manuscript and book. Carol's testimony is vitally important as it weaves together a horrific counter-narrative behind the benign mainstream narrative regarding Stanley Milgram and the experiments on obedience he was conducting. In the mainstream narrative, Milgram's experiments are heralded with disclaimers of no humans were hurt in these experiments, and the test subjects are all promoted as being consenting adults. The reality, however, is much darker as Milgram's experimentation on humans crossed over into MKUltra, as well as using unconsenting children as test subjects, things the MSM will never tell us. Carol is here today to share the full truth of what was actually happening behind closed doors, as well as to show proof of the experimentation done on her at the hands of people who should have been protecting her. Carol's testimony absolutely blew me away, and I know it'll blow you away too. So please turn off whatever you're doing, grab a pen and paper, and get ready to unlearn and relearn an important part of our history that has all but been hidden from us by an incredible warrior hero of a woman who is devoted to stopping human trafficking by devoting all proceeds from her new book towards rehabilitation, housing, and employment placement for survivors of modern-day slavery. Before I finish introducing today's guest, I wanted to give just a couple quick reminders and updates. If you'd like to be a guest on the show, share any information privately with me, or send me a written testimony for my upcoming book series, or to be written in a Substack article, you can email me at imagineabetterworld2020@gmail.com. I've also partnered with a couple of my personal favorite brands to get you guys discount codes on a couple of my favorite products, including Rife Technology frequency machines and blockers, and CZTL's high-quality methylene blue. Both of these links, as well as the rest of my contact links, are in the show notes, and I'd love your support across all platforms. Thank you all for helping to make the imagination the safest space on the internet for survivor, whistleblower, advocate, and educator disclosures. So you guys, without further ado, please help me in welcoming today's guest of honor, walking miracle, survivor, thriver, content creator, survivor and anti-child abuse advocate, entrepreneur, and a bright light in the darkness, the one, the only, Carol Stanhope. Carol, thank you so much for being here with me and with us today.
Oh my gosh, Emma, you are the hostess with the mostest. You give the best introductions. I'm blushing.
Oh, you are
Yeah.
absolutely amazing. I'm so grateful to have you here. The second that I listened to your testimony, I actually listened to it twice in a row, which I rarely will do right away just because it's a lot to process. But there was just so much that you had went through and so much of this counter narrative to something I knew about, the Milgram experiments. I have heard of those multiple times in my life and never really thought to investigate further. And, after listening to your testimony, I realized what a big piece of history is missing from the MK Ultra Monarch scene and conversation, and how much your testimony can plug in this really big piece to this puzzle that I think is going to help a lot of people. So let's go back in history, Carol, and let's maybe paint the outline of, your family history a little bit and kind of what set you up to be put into these programs.
Okay, well, as you said, in that beautiful introduction, my father was an illegal immigrant. He came over from Finland at 17 years of age on I guess it was a cargo freighter into Boston Harbor. And I guess he was trying to run away from being conscripted into the Finnish army and things of that nature. So he came to America, as he said, the land of milk and honey. That's what he always said. He was very flamboyant. And he came here to make his way. And they discovered him in the belly of the ship. And for some reason, unbeknownst to me, the OSS and slash CIA was contacted, and they took him into custody and questioned him with an interpreter because I don't think his English was very good. He spoke, mainly Finnish. And then they found out, that he had, come here illegally. He had stowed away on the ship. And then, of course, they gave him the ultimatum. Okay, well, here's your two choices. You can participate in our program as an asset, or we can deport you back to Finland. And then, of course, they forcibly enlisted him into the Merchant Marine, where he was, I guess, his main thing was to guard precious metals and gems. And then at some point when he got older, he had turned into a drug mule. And he actually told me when he was in Thailand, you could buy a whole bale of pot in the early 40s for like $5. Yeah. Yeah, he used to brag about that. He was very, very flamboyant and colorful character.
Wow. $5. I can't even imagine.
$5 for a whole bale of pot back in the early 40s. Yeah. And
Wow.
the ladies would bring it right down to the dock, ready for the mules to, take it where it needed to go.
And so no history with your father. He was not a test subject in any of these programs that you're aware of, correct?
Not that I know of, but we do have Illuminati roots in Scandinavia, in Finland and Sweden and Norway. All of my extended family, I went to visit Scandinavia back in the early 2000s, and they're all, I mean, they make you feel like chump change. They're all chemists, and one's a professor of High German. Another one is a city council woman. They're all very learned people. So yeah, I was very intimidated.
Oh my gosh, I
Very,
bet.
Yeah, very intimidated. So then, after he did, the merchant marine and the drug mule thing, he met my mom, in the early 50s. They met at a, Finnish dance club, and they fell in love. And, they had my brother, and I have an older brother and older sister who were born in Chicago. And then they decided to go back to my mother's farm where she had grown up. And then they had me in, 1962. And, that's when, my father offered me up to, MK Ultra. And I assumed that was because of his, contacts in New England in such close proximity to Yale and Harvard, coming into Boston Harbor. I would really call that, being at the wrong place at the wrong time.
Do you know by chance, was the picture painted for your parents that this was going to be a very benign program, that there was no abuse in it? Do you know what their perspective of it was, or did they know going into it what you would be facing?
Well, one of my father's, mistresses, who he actually cheated on my mother with, this was in the early 70s, and I'll call her H. I won't say her name. She's an elderly, wealthy woman now. I have run into her, here in past years, and apparently they were like hoodwinked into what was really going to happen to me. This was just, oh, well, you come from the Norse lineage, you have a rare Rh negative bloodline. We're trying to delve into this and see what kind of, research we can get to benefit humanity, yada, yada, yada. And then, of course, when they got me in their clutches at the University of Minnesota and Duluth Air Force Base, they just took their license and started, having their way with me, basically. I don't know how else to say it, because that's what it was.
And what about your mother's history? Any history of abuse on her side, or even parenting as far as being maybe absent or negligent, anything like that that you experienced?
My maternal grandmother was a very strict and stern, no nonsense woman. I mean, she died when I was 6. And, all I can remember, she gave me a little, toothbrush that had a aquamarine iridescent penguin that would spin on the end of it. And I just loved that toothbrush. So, I loved my grandmother because she gave me this cute little, toothbrush. But yeah, my mother said she was very stern. Of course, they had a working farm. It was just my mother and my grandmother because my grandfather ran off. And, so, yeah, she said that it was a very difficult upbringing. And my grandmother, she said, wasn't necessarily abusive, but just very strict, to an extreme degree.
Was there any dissociation that ran in your family that you sort of inherited, or did your own dissociation come from just being in these programs?
Yeah, I believe that they target, people. I mean, when they get the blood sample and everything, I think, and they find out what lineage you come from. I think they can discern if you are a good candidate. From what I read, Fritz Springmeier's book, How to Create, an Undetectable Mind Control Slave. I don't know if you've ever read that book, but, he does such a great, job of breaking it all down about how they do try to identify bloodlines and the ability to dissociate and things of that nature. So I think, once they got, the blood type and the family profile, they're like, oh, bingo, we hit the jackpot. That's what I think.
Your father was the one that essentially handed you over, how you say, to the CIA and to these programs, well, the OSS at the time. Can you talk
Yeah.
about what that looked like in your life? I know that your memory started around 4 that you can recall, and you might have a few from a little bit younger, maybe 3 years old. Do you want to maybe talk about how you remember that happening, and how you got to these bases and university that you were at, and just kind of how that started manifesting in your life?
Yeah, the clearest memory I have, I guess I was about 5, and, it's actually the first chapter in the book. And, my father was waking me up early in the morning. It was cold. It was winter time. I don't know, maybe December, January, something like that. And he says, in the Finnish language, he says, Harata kunta kimpale, which means get up, you know. And he used to call me Gold Nugget. Kunta kimpale or Gulamuru is Gold Nugget. That was his nickname for me. And I'm like, where are we going? And he said, Me olami menoso uti, which meant we're going to the Air Force Base. So he put my jacket on, took me in the car. I was usually given a glass of juice upon arrival, which I assume had some narcotics in it because everything started to get very blurry. I remember Dr. Milgram distinctly. I remember he gave me a little locket. It's one of those lockets that says, he who holds the key can open my heart. I don't know if you've ever seen them. It's broken in half and it intersects like a puzzle, and you keep one and you give one to the other person. And he had actually given me one after a successful experiment, which was he kept asking me to this is the Cyranoid part. He kept asking me to repeat anti-establishmentarianism. Once again, anti-establishmentarianism. So what I've been able to gather, and I've brought it out in my book and other interviews, what I can gather is they were trying to see if they could turn somebody into a revolutionary with you know, conditioning and trigger words and mind control, and obviously, you know, with my implants.
Right. And so was it your father that would always transport you to the final destination? And was it always at night that you were going?
The last memory I have, it was early in the morning. It was an early winter morning, probably late December, early January. And you know, Dr. Milgram didn't do anything that I don't have any memories of him really abusing me. He was really more doing the programming and the mind control, because after all, he was a psychologist, right? Like the preeminent psychologist of that era. So he was actually loading me with all of my programs. Like from what I've been able to discern from recently, it's like a honey. The altars are set up in a honeycomb, and then they attach trigger words or phrases to the different altars in that honeycomb. And if they want to dial that particular one up, like the sexualized one or the intellectual one, all they have to do is say that word or that phrase, and then they get you to do the desired result.
And I want to dive into this a little bit more. And before I do, I have heard of Stanley Milgram and the Milgram experiments that the public knows that side of it. Would you be able to just briefly explain about Dr. Milgram and about maybe the public, what he's known for publicly to society? And then we can dive into your story, which was what was happening behind the scenes.
Yeah, he's best known for his obedience to authority experiments, which he conducted at Harvard and Yale in the 60s. And the whole thing was to see if he could get people to administer stronger doses of electricity to a subject. And of course, it was a phantom type of thing. There wasn't really any electricity going through the electrode, but you know, the person administering did not know that, and he would say, turn it up more, turn it up more. And the one experiment, the guy was crying. He goes, I'm going to kill him. And then, you know, Dr. Milgram goes, no, you heard what I said, turn it up more. And the guy was like absolutely going bananas. You know what I mean? So, you know, he proved that, you know, people will do things out of character if pressured by an authority figure.
And the percentage
He was
on
very,
that.
he was very sadistic. He was a sadistic man. There's no two ways about it.
And it's interesting because it's like the public story, like every time I've heard it, it's almost celebrated. Like, wow, look at this experiment that he did. He found out this. Look at the percentage of people that would participate in basically abusing somebody if authority told them to. And it's sort of heralded as like this like revolutionary experiment in a sense. And I think that's why it's really easy to almost look at him in a heroic way versus, okay, this is a little bit weird. Why would somebody even run an experiment like this? Was anybody hurt? Was there other things happening behind the scenes? You know, and then going into like the whole Nazi-ish side of it. And, that's he's basically like figuring out how to replicate, what they did in Nazi Germany, really, which ties into MK Ultra. So I think there's like very subtle MK Ultra connectors, just hearing the public story, but you rarely hear about that at all being tied to mind control or anything nefarious. So I want to ask first, before we sort of talk about you becoming a test subject in this experimentation that he was doing, and it wasn't, you were involved with a lot of different experimentation, but when you were first getting put in these programs, um, I know your programming was very isolated compared to some other survivors, which are in very large groups of children that they know of. And you may have had instances. I know when the trafficking started, you were exposed to more kids, but your experimentation was pretty isolated from what I was hearing on other interviews that you did. So I wanted to ask, how did you sort of get chosen as that one child? Was there something that you had that they tested for that was really desirable aside from maybe lineage and bloodlines, like any spiritual gifts or any reasons why you were sort of the she's going to be the only one that we're going to do this with?
Um, well, the only thing that I can gather, and the more that I learned and the more people that I talked to, my father's mistresses and things who are still alive now, and they've clued me in on things. We are direct, and I was taught this from an early age. We are direct descendants of Eric the Red and Leif Erikson. And of course, Leif Erikson settled North America 500 years before Columbus did. I mean, if you go to Boston and San Francisco, they don't celebrate Columbus Day. They celebrate Leif Erikson Day as the rightful founder of North America. So I think that was the rationale, for choosing, his children. And I'm pretty sure my sister is in very bad shape. She has not come to terms with her programming. But I think all three of us kids were experimented on. And I think that the Norse lineage was the rationale. I think it was a challenge for them to say, oh, well, let's see if the Vikings are really as tough as history says they were. You know what I mean? It's just, shame on us for being in the wrong place at the wrong time with the right bloodline.
That makes sense. Yeah, and they, those bloodlines and lineages are so important to them, over so many other things that children could have, talents and different things. So that's really fascinating, and that you've been able to do all that detective work too and figure out your lineage. And so let's talk about you being introduced to Milgram. What do you think that this started before age 5? Kind of what did that pathway look like for you? What did the experimentation start with, and how did it evolve throughout your childhood years?
Okay, well, I'm what's known as a Cyranoid, and I think he was kind of embarrassed about his Cyranoid experiments because he wrote extensively on all the other things like obedience to authority and things of that nature. But I noticed that he was kind of standoffish with bringing too much information in terms of what he did with what he did with the Cyranoids, and the Cyranoids were based on Sir Edmund Rostan's Cyrano de Bergerac. I guess he was a 17th century playwright. Yeah, so the Cyranoid experience were based on Sir Edmund Rostan's 17th century play, Cyrano de Bergerac. And very simply, Cyrano de Bergerac was a brilliant but ugly man, and he had his sights on this beautiful woman, Roxanne. So he used this good-looking man, Christian, to try to win Roxanne's heart. And he would whisper into Christian's ear from the bushes of the things he wanted to say to Roxanne to win her heart. Well, that was the whole premise of Dr. Milgram's Cyranoid experiments, which they say in books he started on children at 11, but that's not true. I was 5, okay? I was 5 when he was doing this to me in 1967. And he started out in the laboratory and he would say, repeat after me, anti-establishmentarianism. And I would repeat it and he'd say, very good. Once again, anti-establishmentarianism. and then he would take me over to the table and write it, and he would write it down, and then he would say, "Excellent, you'll do very nicely." So that was the first memory of the beginnings of programming and conditioning me to what I think they wanted to see if they could turn somebody into a revolutionary or a dissident, and then follow them through their life and see what they did with that.
This talks a little bit about different devices that were used. Did you have these different transmitters and things used in your programming?
Um, yeah, I have one implanted in my head. It's called a stimoceiver.
And so what age did that happen at? And let's maybe talk about that part of your experimentation.
The best of my recollection, and as I told you the other day, Emma, I do have amnesiac barriers and dissociative disorder also. So when I recovered my memories of the implants, and of course metal detectors have gone off over the years, and now I have proof that I have been implanted. So looking back in retrospect, that was 1967 when they were implanted, and I've never lost the memory of my head being wrapped in blood-soaked gauze and still being under like heavy anesthesia, and getting out of my parents' car and saying, "Oh, my head hurts," and it was like echoing through my head, and then I passed out, and then that's the last I remember. But yeah, that was 1967.
What's sort of the end goal or purpose of this experiment? What are they trying to accomplish?
Um, well, Sidney Gottlieb, who was the director of MK Ultra, and he was the big boss of all of these neuroscientists and psychiatrists. He was calling the shots because he's the one who could requisition children from all over the world, give them LSD. The guy was just a real dirtbag. Let's just say what he was. They wanted. He said in his book, in the book written about him, Poisoner in Chief, it says, quoting him, "What we aim to do is break and shatter the original personality and create a newly inserted one." That was his goal. And these psychologists and these neuroscientists were working under his tutelage, and that was their aim. They wanted to see if they could build an army, it seems like, of cyborgs or automatons. That's what it seems like.
Do you have any idea how many other test subjects there were that underwent these surgeries that you did?
Well, Dr. Delgado, who actually did the implantations, and he's the one that invented the stemoceiver in 1963. He claims that there was only 25 humans, but I don't believe that. I believe that there were hundreds of us. I think they had us on a conveyor belt back then. And it's hard to say, but I would venture to say it's in the hundreds. And Sidney Gottlieb, the director of MK Ultra, had a license to requisition children from all over the world. So if there's still people in this generation living, I mean, there's probably people all over the world, in the same position that I am.
And so as far as Delgado and Milgram go, I think those names, especially Milgram, have been heard publicly, probably by the good that they have done and their accolades and things like that. And obviously their work with prestigious, hospitals and universities. What was their relationship together? How were they working together? And then what's both of their relationship to the CIA and MK Ultra that people might not know about?
Okay, well, Dr. Delgado got a scholarship to Yale, and then he ended up being their director of neuroscience. And then Milgram came to Yale in 1960, so obviously they were colleagues. And based on the hardware that I have, you know, in my brain and the brandings that I have on my body, um, through the process of elimination and deductive reasoning, since I remember Milgram, he was with me up until I was 18, off and on. Um, it stands to reason that they collaborated. In other words, Milgram did the mind control. He loaded all the programs into me, and then Delgado is the one that put in the implants and the electrodes. They were both Yale employees, and they collaborated because they were there at the same time. And I have the scars and the drill holes on my body to prove it.
And so before we get there, because I know we have a lot of pictures and you have a lot of proof to share, you know, with how these implants and surgeries happened and the different sort of branding that they left on you. What other types of experiments were they using you for in particular, in MK Ultra, Monarch, and with Milgram?
I remember electroshock treatments, and I still have phantom shocks to the palms of my hands and the bottoms of my feet in the middle of the night. I have those phantom feelings. Sensory deprivation, being left in closed dark spaces for long periods of time. A forced ingestion of urine, which I understand, after my research, I understand that that's a Masonic ritual. Yeah, that was like an initiation for me as a little kid, you know, being forced to drink urine. Uh, or Implements inserted into my orifices, just any number, sexual abuse. I mean, any number of dastardly, wicked, barbaric practices.
Oh my gosh. And at the same time that all this is going on, were you still going to school and doing normal kid stuff?
Yeah, but my teachers were always sending notes home. I think I still have one of the notes back from the mid 60s. It said, you know, "Dear Mrs. Magnus, Carol seems to have trouble concentrating and she seems very nervous and fidgety." And I put in the book, I said, "Yeah, little did my teachers know that I was moonlighting as an MK Ultra guinea pig."
Oh my gosh. And so you were showing signs and, you know, people didn't pick up on it. Did you ever have anybody who ever asked you or reached out, or, you know, anybody who might have attempted to help even if you didn't know what you were going through?
No, no one ever did. And I think that they could have possibly been told to keep their mouth shut. They could have been briefed on what was going on behind the scenes, you know. That's the only thing I can gather. You know, I don't know, people don't seem to like to get involved, you know.
Totally. You're absolutely right. And whenever you're going through this, I know that you were dissociative and compartmentalized. Was there ever points where your programming would start to sort of leak through and you would ask for help or maybe disclose something? Did you ever have an instance where you shared anything with somebody or told your parents or tried to reach out for help?
No, but I was always running away when I was a little kid. Do you remember the cartoons were like, the cartoon character would take like a bandana and put clothes in it and then tie it on the end of a stick? I used to do that. I actually ran away when I was about, I don't know, 4 going on 5 years old. And I think we had a long dirt road that led out to the main road. And my parents heard me shutting the door early in the morning. And I think I got about a half a mile down the road before they intercepted me. Another time I got on my father's tractor and tried to escape, and I pulled the choke and the tractor bucked, and I did a backward somersault off of the back of the tractor and busted my 2 front teeth out. Yeah, I was always trying to get away. I was always trying to get away. Yeah.
And so when you're really young, you're going through these heinous experiments and programming, What was life like at home? And I know you said your siblings may have been in these programs too. Did your parents ever suspect anything? Did they end up finding out what you were actually going through ever? And what was life like at home, like once all this was kind of done for the day and you'd go back to bed or, come home from school?
Well, we were on a working farm. Aside from my father, being a spineless jellyfish, maybe he didn't have a choice, and not protecting us. We had a big farm. We had cows and pigs and sheep. He grew alfalfa. He was a very talented farmer. It was a beautiful farm. If I get a chance, I'll send you some more pictures at some point. So he was very busy and pretty agitated. And then he was always going out of town. And whenever he would return from these so-called business trips, he would bring me a little trinket that I could put on a charm bracelet. So that was like, I guess my little treat or whatever. But he was always very agitated. He was a heavy drinker. He was abusive towards my mother. My older brother and sister tried to be, kind to me. They would play games with me and help me, plant the garden and things like that. I mean, there was some semblance of normalcy, but, you could just feel the chaos, uh, you know, brewing underneath kind of at all times.
Oh my gosh, I can't even imagine. And whenever you were going through these programs, initially, I know you said that there was maybe sexual abuse that happened as part of the programming, but you weren't automatically put into child trafficking until a little bit later in your journey, correct?
Yeah, that was in my teens.
Okay, so we'll get there in a minute. Let's go back to the surgery and let's talk about how Yale and these universities and these different places tie in. Because that can also be really deceptive for people. We're also taught to really relinquish and to look up to sort of these Ivy League schools. And I think that facade really keeps people from investigating further and seeing how these places are actually related to MK Ultra, to nefarious things, to secret societies. Do you know how these universities that you were sort of associated with and other places, Air Force bases, how is all this kind of tied together? Because you seem to have been rotating to different areas too.
Yeah, well, people have like kind of always suspected that the Skull and Bone and the CIA were connected. Um, I don't know that Yale and Harvard as a whole are all on board with this. I think what I suspect is there were some rogue individuals. I think that maybe Milgram, since Milgram and Delgado had tenure at Harvard and Yale. I think they used their positions to do some rogue activities that possibly Yale and Harvard were not aware of. I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt, but I have a strong feeling.
It's interesting because then, I've had people on front that were at Stanford Research Institute, and I had a Virginia Tech survivor who had programming done at that school too. So it is really interesting how many hands the government has extended out into these experimentation and sort of who's tied into it, whether it's something that's known by them or not, just that this stuff is happening on these campuses. So that's really interesting about your story. And the Skull and Bones, was that something that was Dr. Delgado in the Skull and Bones in his tenure at Yale?
I didn't see him get initiated, but I understand that they're the ones that the Skull and Bones recruit the best, the top, like the top 5%. They groom captains of industry, also, for the medical field, for politics. They're always looking the best of the best. And, even though Dr. Delgado and Dr. Milgram were statistic in their own rights, they were also, they were brilliant. They were evil geniuses. So I think it stands to reason that yes, they were definitely initiated into the Skull and Bones, especially since Delgado was a Yale alum.
And so let's talk about exactly what they did with the surgeries and implants. And I can bring up photos to show too. But if you want to talk about that a little bit, I know that's a really big part of your story.
Yeah, since I was 5 years old, I always had the memories of those blood-soaked bandages, but I never thought anything, as fantastical as having like the Asimov's positronic brain. You know what I mean? I never think of that. So very simply, I was a courier for FedEx in the early 2000s, and I had to go to the courthouse and deliver, to the judge's chambers. And when I would go through the metal detector would always go off, and then the guards would always laugh it off and say, "Oh yeah, it's nothing. Go ahead, whatever." And I was starting to read like a lot of Fritz Springmeier stuff about the mind control slaves and things of that nature. And I suspected that I had them, but I was busy raising a family then, so I just kind of put it on the back burner because I was just too busy with my responsibilities.
Of course, totally understandable. Yeah. And so, when did you first become aware that you had this done? Was this something you always knew? I know you had kind of a memory of having bandages, but did you know that, or have anybody told you that you went through the surgery stuff? No.
No, no. This past January, right after New Year's, I couldn't sleep, and I had a bad headache, and I started rubbing my temple, and I felt a hole, and then I felt the other side there was a matching hole, and then I just started rubbing my head, and that's how I discovered all of the implantation sites for where the multi-lead needle electrodes had been inserted in my brain in 1967.
Oh my goodness. And so did this was this the reason why you shaved your head to
Yeah,
get to the
and
bottom of it?
if you follow my nose up to the crown of my head, you can see that there's a big indentation there, and that's actually where the skull and bones insignia is. I'm not going to say carved. It looks like it's been branded. It looks like they had like a special brand and they just went, they just sizzled it. That's what it looks like because when you see it up close, the artwork is very detailed. Yeah, there's an implantation site right there. I guess that's what you would call the not the temporal lobe, but the front that's on the frontal lobe, and that's one of the implantation sites right there.
Where all were the implantations? Like how was it strategic where they put certain things? Were they
Yeah,
connecting it to different
yeah.
parts of the brain?
There's two in my there's one on each side of my temporal lobes. There's two in the frontal lobes. There's two in the parietal lobes, and there's two in the occipital lobe. And then there's something called a pulse generator. And the pulse generator electrode wire actually bulges out of the back of my skull. And that's connected to the AM/FM stimoceiver in my cerebellum, which is in the base of the brain.
Oh my gosh, that is such an intense surgery to do, on such a young person, especially. I can't even imagine what that recovery must have been like for you. What I know you were really young. Do you remember a difference in how life was after this or anything that stands out where it was being activated or ways that this changed your life?
Yeah, yeah. This was the era. Now, Project Bluebird went on, I guess, from 51 to 50, 51 to 52, and then MK Ultra kicked in 53 and went on to 73. And so the objective of Project Bluebird, even though I was much older after Project Bluebird, what I can say is that they like to take previous projects, ongoing projects, and then do beta tests for future projects and kind of piece them together like a patchwork quilt, and then just kind of give you like the whole whammy at once. Because my mother used to say, you see the pretty bluebirds? We're in the middle of the beautiful Minnesota forest, so we did have bluebirds. And she'd say, see the beautiful bluebirds? They're singing. you hear the birdies singing, they're beautiful bluebirds, and she would say that, and then I would be triggered to go do like milk the cows and go, plant in the garden. I mean, I guess that was my trigger to go and, help or, be a little farmhand at like 5 or 6 years old.
Oh my gosh, wow.
And
And
that's what, yeah, the objectives of Project Bluebird were inducing amnesia, creating multiple personalities, inserting hypnotic access codes, which, is triggers to get you to do what they want you to do. Let's see, placing electrodes in your brain. So these things in my brain are a protocol for Project Bluebird. Administering LSD 25 to children, and also using electroconvulsive therapy, which I still have many convulsions to this day, but it's usually in the middle of the night, and it's very disruptive to my sleep.
oh my goodness, what other ways has this, I know that you just found out this past January, can you look back at your life and say, oh my gosh, this thing that I experienced was from these things in my brain? Were there other ways that this impacted your life as an adult?
Yeah. There's one. I told my advisor, his name is Scott. He lives in upstate New York, and we were discussing it many months ago. And I was telling him about this certain memory that I had. And my this was, I guess this was in the mid to late 80s. My kids were off with their dad. I don't know, maybe at the park or something. And I thought, okay, well, what am I going to do? I've got time on my hands. And so I'm going to go have a couple of cocktails at the local pub. And I don't know why I did it. I really don't know why, but I got dressed up in this red monochromatic outfit, top, shoes, perfectly matching. And I went to the pub. And when I walked in the pub, very coincidentally, the song "Lady in Red" by Christy Berg was playing, and I ordered a vodka and orange juice. Took a couple of sips, and I never took ballet in my life, but I got up on the floor and did an arabesque ballet to "Lady in Red," and then I knocked back my vodka and orange juice, and I walked out. And then years later on their website, it was talking about. I just came across it by accident, and it said, has anybody ever seen the lady in red? She was here and then she blew out like a breeze. And I'm so embarrassed about that. It's still online to this day. And it's kind of embarrassing.
Did they have a photo of you too or
Where that
anything?
came from, because I never took ballet in my life. So I can only gather that that was one of the programs that was loaded in. And for some reason, that song triggered it, and it took it down from the honeycomb and said, okay, put in this CD. You know what I mean? It's really strange, really, really strange.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of ways that this impacted you. Anything with health that you experienced? Any health things that this negatively affected you with?
Uh, yeah, I've had gastrointestinal problems, insomnia, bad panic attacks. I don't know if you've ever had a panic attack, Emma. I hope not. But you feel like you're going to die. Your heart is palpitating. You feel like you're going to pass out. You feel like you're losing your grip on reality. Um, yeah, it's very bad. So I've gone through something called Sidran Foundation therapy. It uses aromatherapy and art, like coloring and adult coloring books. And I guess that kind of like circumvents the episodes, because I understand that panic attacks are like a mini seizure. So you have to divert your attention to something else.
Oh my gosh, how terrifying. And so
Yeah.
whenever you, and I want to go back to whenever you were a kid too, but since we're talking about this, what was your initial thoughts and how did you sort of discover those? And let's talk about your journey discovering what it was, and we can go through some of these photos and sort of reverse engineer your story of what you went through as a kid.
Okay, how did I discover the electrodes?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
what was your process uncovering what those were?
Oh, so I just got really desperate. And of course, I was mortified, to shave my head. But I'm like, well, what other choice do I have? I have to document these. I have to prove to the world because everybody's calling me crazy, right? And so I have to vindicate and exonerate myself and prove to them that I had it. And even my family was like ready to commit me. And I'm like, okay, well, now it's down to brass tacks. I got to shave my head. I got to get a metal detector. I've got to get an x-ray. I've got to document this. We're seeking out the services of a neuroscientist to guide me through, my elderly years, because these things are not going to come out. They're integral part of my brain. So yeah, it was terrifying, to uncover them once my friend shaved my head. That was back on July 28th. But I felt vindicated, and they were like, "Oh my gosh, we're so sorry that we ever, doubted you. This is very clear." That's like not my friend who's a nurse. She goes, "That's not even abstract. Those are very clear images, that are branded into your head, and especially the electrode. If you look up towards the crown of my head, that's called a pulse generator, and that's actually the junction that takes and delivers all the impulses and the neuromodulation to the different parts of the brain.
Oh my
I mean,
God.
it's almost like a reverse X-ray. I mean, it's very clear. And my friend is a little Southern belle. She's a nurse, and she goes, "Y'all, that ain't no vein." It's
Oh,
so
bless
funny.
her. I love that you had support going through this and people who believed you after, seeing this. And
Yeah, but if
you're so
you look
brave
right
for
in the
shaving your
middle of
head.
my skull, I mean, God,
I
you
know.
can see that there's a device right in the middle of my skull, and that is the delivery system that takes the impulses from the cerebellum in the base of the brain to all the different lobes to elicit whatever response they want to get.
And let's go through, you can explain what's in some of these other photos that will flow through.
Yeah, that's a CIA tattoo. If you look, you can see there's little pinpricks, and they love that New World Order symbology. They wanted to say, hey, this is our test subject. This is our lab rat. I don't want anybody else to claim her. She's ours. So I mean, they branded me. I've got that stuff all over my body. I've got little triangles and skulls and phalluses all over my body, and it's a nasty daily reminder for me. And that's another CIA brand that matches the one on my leg. They love that symbology. They just, that's their brand. I feel like a Jersey cow who's been branded, make sure that I stay in the herd or something. I mean, it's crazy.
Oh my gosh. Oh, this was interesting too, if you want to explain what this is.
Yeah, that's the metal detector. My friends scanned my brain after they shaved my head. And the detectable metals are iron, steel, magnet, and aluminum. And if you research the stemoceiver, the electrodes and the pulse generator and the stemoceiver are indeed made of iron, steel, magnets, and aluminum.
Oh my
That's what
goodness.
they're.
Have
Yeah.
you ever taken this to a doctor or anybody that has sort of that specialty of brain implants or brain stuff? And like, what was the
Yeah, yeah,
response?
yeah. My friend has a friend who's a neuroscientist, and he's going to help us out. Like I told my other friend, I said I can't go to my regular MD. This is like way out of his line of expertise, and I don't want to put him under that kind of pressure.
Understandably, I mean, that has to be really hard for you to navigate that, asking for help, especially because, you were taken to like hospitals and places like that for, you know, uh, things like this. So I've noticed with survivors, it can be really difficult to get help or validation.
Okay, so there's the skull and bones insignia, and that's the insignia of Yale University. It's called the Brotherhood of Death. And under the skull, you can see another little skull, and then the little skull is next to a big phallus. And they just, my friend she goes, it's bad enough that they were doing this to you, but to put a mark or to put a signature is, I don't know what to call it. I said, oh, you mean barbaric? Crimes against humanity, mutilation. You know what I mean?
Was this, how did they put these insignia on you? They're so subtle. Was it, like you were saying, like pricks that they were doing, sort of like a tattoo scarring? Or was there a different way that they were branding you?
I think they had their own custom made brand because I mean the lines are very they're subtle, but in another way they're very well defined. I mean, it's not saying that that's abstract and you can't tell that that's a skull and a phallus and another skull. I mean, it's very evident.
A
And
hundred.
if you put contrast on it, it's even more visible.
Do on those on your head too, if you were to run your hand over them, can you actually feel them also? Do they sort of come up
Yeah,
off your
yeah,
skin?
yeah, you can. Yeah, the big indentation on the top of my head, that will literally hold like a tablespoon of water and not run out. That's how deep it is.
And so what are we seeing here in this picture?
Okay, that is a lead wire from an electrode in the occipital portion of my brain, and that all hooks up to the stemoceiber, which is in the cerebellum, and that's the base of the brain.
Oh
And
my
that's
goodness.
yeah, that's like the delivery system. That's like the junction, if you will, where everything gets routed to all the other lead wires and electrodes.
How did you obtain this photo? It's so clear.
I can't tell you. It's a well-guarded secret.
Gotcha.
If the
Yep.
person, the person will kill me if I tell you.
That's amazing though. That's really cool that you were able to get such a good photo of it where you can see the details so well and it's not maybe just like through the skin or something. You can actually like see it, which is really fascinating. And then there's this one.
Yeah, you can actually see the lead wire going into the occipital. That's the outside view. I mean, it's very clear, and it almost looks inflamed. If you look into the implantation site where the lead wire is going in, I mean, it almost looks like it's inflamed, and it's like, is that why I have headaches and insomnia?
Oh my
You
God.
know?
I was wondering that if you get a lot of headaches too, I would think that that would be a side effect potentially.
I mean, that's so clear.
And then here's I don't know if this was the same one or a different one, but you can see it here also protruding. It's so clear. Oh my goodness. Do you want to share what these ones were too while we're looking at these?
Yeah. I'm going to plug my phone in for a minute.
Oh, no worries, of course.
That's those are the puppies, Romeo and Juliet, that Dr. Milgram gave to me when we arrived in Florida in 1969, 1970. That was a gift. That was a gift from Dr. Milgram for my further experiments.
Oh my
You can
gosh.
tell I don't look very, you can tell I don't look happy.
Yeah, you don't look so thrilled at your reward for what you went through, even though that's, dogs can be very therapeutic, but that's really narcissistic that that's what they gave you is like, here, good girl, here's a couple puppies and just forget about it, look how darling you are too. Look at that thick head of hair you had.
Yeah.
What a beautiful child. You're still beautiful. And
Oh,
then,
thank you. Yeah, that's when I was 6 years old. We were still in Minnesota when that was taken.
oh my goodness, so precious. And nobody even knew what you were going through behind the scenes.
And that's my parents when they got married in Chicago in the early 50s.
Oh my goodness.
Olavi and Lila.
How old did they live till?
My mother lived till 79 and my father lived to 73.
Okay.
And that's me, and that's an excerpt from my book. That's me and my mentor, Lynn Moss Sharman. She was also experimented on by Delgado, and she also had brain implants.
Wow, and you guys both met. That's amazing when people can get together and corroborate stories and have those overlaps, even if it wasn't 100% the same. It's so validating how other survivors are coming out and talking because it connects dots for people.
Yeah, she died in 2014, and Delgado had trained her to be an assassin. She said she knew how to skin a human being 3 different ways.
Oh my gosh. I've heard that a lot on my show too, that was, a big thing that they were using children for, which is just so unbelievable for the public to comprehend that the government would train children to do such things and to do things on children that are just so heinous and disgusting.
Exactly.
Oh, these were some videos maybe we can talk about too.
Yeah, that's where my friend from work is shaving my head, and they thought that I was totally bonkers. But when the hair all came off and they could see all the holes and the brands and stuff, they like apologized profusely.
Oh, were you scared or nervous to do this? That's a
Yeah,
big thing
I
for women
was.
to
Yeah,
do.
I was, because I really like my hair. I'm like most chicks. I really like my hair, and yeah. So, but I had to do it, and it's gonna make for a great second book. So it was worth the sacrifice.
And it grows back, right? And you're beautiful and you figured out like you're wearing hats now and you look
Yeah,
great exactly the way that you are. And then look
thank
at
you.
here's another one of you getting your head shaved. That had to have been like an emotional moment for you.
Yeah, it was traumatic. We Vikings, we like our hair.
I know that I don't there's not volume on what we're watching, but was there any reaction? Were they noticing stuff right away or anything that they
Yeah,
were
they
seeing
were
like, oh
going,
my gosh.
yeah, they were like scrutinizing my head. They're like, "Oh my God, you see that? There's a skull there. You see that? There's a phallus there."
And then this one we're getting some close-ups, sort of like the
Yeah,
photos.
my head is totally mutilated. Look at that big, oh my gosh, my head is so mutilated. It's horrifying. My head is so mutilated.
How many total, and I don't know if you know this, was this all done in one shot or were there multiple surgeries that they did to
No,
put,
from what I can gather, it was all done in one shot, and what I can gather, it took about 15 hours.
oh my gosh, 15 hours.
Yeah, and you can see the big red spot where the electrode, where the electrode that bulges out of my head is. I mean, I made a satire out of it online about how the US government doesn't do remediation because I've got this list of junk in my head. So I'm doing satire on, I mean, it's cathartic for me to do satire on this, because if I don't laugh, I'm going to cry.
That's something that happens that I have to explain a lot with my podcast. Some of my guests I can tell that feel like they're gonna cry, sometimes burp up laughs. And people who don't understand trauma will be like, how can they laugh during that? And it's like, you have to, or else the alternative is to, just break down and, not be able to stop crying. You have to somehow find a light in all this darkness.
Exactly.
And look at this. You can see that. Oop, I just put my thing over it, but yeah, whoop, you can see that red spot really clearly.
Yeah, they mutilated me terribly.
Oh my goodness.
Absolutely barbaric.
It's heinous, just to think about like that is literally your whole skull. It's not like they just did one spot, your whole head has different indentations and carvings in it.
Right. And that's a really good shot of the skull and bones and the phallus. I mean, it's very defined. I mean, it's not abstract, saying, okay, well, it could be this or that. I mean, you can tell it's a skull and a phallus.
Absolutely. Oh my goodness. That had to have been really devastating for you to see all of that too, but probably also very validating of, you knowing that you're not crazy and having your friends be able to see that and be like, "Oh, you are telling the truth."
Yeah, I've rallied a lot of support. That was the best thing I ever did, because I've rallied a lot of support since I shaved my head, and people were able to see that.
I mean, it's so isolating going through this because it's made to sound crazy and insane when you talk about it because it is. Like you said, it's barbaric. This is stuff that should never be done on humans, and here they're doing it on children It does sound crazy to people, but it's amazing that, you were able to prove it in so many ways and that you took these lengths to show people that, hey, this actually did happen and I'm going to show you. Oh, this was the one where they are putting that app on your head, right? To see the metal detector, I think,
Right. Yeah, yeah, that's the metal detector.
in live time. Oh my goodness. That had to have been really shocking for them to see that too on top of it. Good for you for doing this. You're so brave.
Well, they ruined my life. I mean, don't get me wrong, Emma. I have a lot of blessing. I have four beautiful kids. They're all college educated. They're all successful, knock on wood. But I mean, as far as my personal life, my personal life has been really effed up, and somebody has to pay for that. And so I'm going to pay them back by writing books and going on TED Talk and whatever I can do, set up a trust fund for survivors, whatever I can do.
That's amazing. And so let's go back to your childhood and you're going through these experiments with Dr. Milgram. You had all of these, this massive surgery on your brain that is, affecting you whether you know it or not as a child. That's a really big deal, and you're getting past all these different experiments, MK Ultra. How did that start evolving? How did your path start evolving? And let's talk about you eventually ending up on the child trafficking side.
Okay, well, my mother divorced my father in well, I guess it was 73, 74. He was a big philanderer. He was a high-level Freemason, at least 33 degrees. He always wore the rings. It's not like he hid it. He wore the symbolism, the jewelry and things. And my mother finally just got fed up, and she divorced him when I was about 11 years old. And then he got very desperate. He wanted to keep me in the program because, of course, the CIA was pressuring him to keep me in the program. So he sent some Masonic teenagers to start giving me LSD, marijuana, lots and lots of alcohol, angel dust. And I was just a repository for, any kind of drug that they wanted to give me. So when they got me good and inebriated and good and high, they started taking me to the island of Palm Beach and filming me in child pornography and cast me in this underground film series called Crom Marassier. And it was by this Dutch filmmaker, Ina. And I guess they made a lot of money off of it. I don't think that the films were shown extensively in the United States, but I know that they were available in the Netherlands and Scandinavia and maybe Germany too.
And where would they, obviously the child exploitation that they were having you perform in was trafficking. Were they taking you to locations? Was this happening on, the Air Force Base or any of these universities or anything too?
No, no, the trafficking took place in Palm Beach when I was between the ages of 13 and 15.
Mm.
And they would take me to condos, high-end hotels. They would take me to steak houses and like feed me martinis and get me totally obliterated. I mean, I didn't even know my own name for like 3 years. I was just like a repository for every drug known to man: angel dust, speed, purple microdot, peyote. I mean, I think part of my panic attacks are like flashbacks from all the LSD and stuff that I did. Honestly, I understand that can happen.
Oh my gosh. And you think about too, this goes against too what a lot of people I think imagine a trafficking situation looks like. You don't really picture a mansion and Palm Beach as being places that somebody would be going through something so horrific as a child. You'd think of maybe the slums or, these really impoverished parts of our country or of a state, or a city, and it's really disturbing that yours was taking place with sort of that elite parasite class, people that did have
Yeah,
money and were feeding you martinis of all things, not just like, some trashy alcohol. They're like making you mixed drinks as a kid and stuff too, like very
yeah,
sophisticated forms of grooming and abuse.
exactly.
Oh my goodness. And so that went on for a couple years in your life. And what started transpiring? Did you reach a point where you were eventually able to get out? Did your father's
Yeah.
contract And how did that pathway work of you?
No, the trafficker Charles, who was several years older than me, probably close to 20 at that time when I was 14, he said, "Okay, sweetie, we're going to get married in a few years." And I was defiant. I'm like, "You're a grown man. I'm not marrying a grown man." I'm like, "You're out of your mind." And so then when this Masonic gang, the people who were trafficking me, went out one day. They left me alone in the house. I don't know why they did. I guess they thought I wasn't going to escape. I guess I was under, what do you call it? Stockholm syndrome or something. I guess they had me so well groomed by that time I wasn't going to go anywhere, and they knew it. I picked up a paper one morning, and on the cover was the Speleological Society of Florida, and they were looking for teenagers to go on caving expeditions around the United States. So I contacted the president, Paolo, and he invited me to go up to Gainesville and Ocala, and I started going on caving expeditions, and that's how I got away from the human traffickers.
Oh my goodness. And so while that's going on, are you still being experimented on by Milgram and still having, mind control programming going on at the same time too?
No, no, that wasn't going on anymore after that. Milgram only popped in and out of my life until I was 18. Like he showed up at my church to see how I was doing. You know what I mean? They wanted to see how their experiment was going. Because let's face it, like back then, I was telling my friend, they probably invested hundreds of thousands of dollars to do this, to get the scientists together, to get, to do the implantation, to do the mind control programming, to get the universities and the Air Force bases, to cooperate with this. So I jokingly call myself an escape piece of equipment, like the one that got away, and that this is like intelligence that the public was never supposed to know.
Oh my gosh. And what was your relationship like with Milgram? Did you ever bond with him or was there ever
Yeah.
any, yeah.
Yeah, my friend said, "Weren't you scared when he kept popping in and out of your life?" And I'm like, "Not really, because he was my daddy. He used to give me jewelry when I was a little kid. He gave me the puzzle heart, he who holds the key can open my heart. And he gave me one half. He says, 'You keep this.' And then he put the other one in his lab coat. And he's like, so as long as you hold on to this, that I love you and nothing bad is ever going to happen to you." So yeah, I had Stockholm syndrome. I was bonded to him like he was like my second daddy.
What was that experience like whenever he visited you? Did you talk to him or engage, or did he just sort of sneak in, check on you, and then leave? What was
Yeah,
that
he,
like?
he would sneak into my church. He snuck into my church when I was a young mother, when I was 18 years old. And you ever get the feeling that somebody's like looking at you, like staring at you, but you get this odd feeling, but you don't know where they are. Well, after I got up after the church service, I turned around and I saw this portly man like looking over, like on his tippy toes over the crowd. And I'm like, "I'll be damned." You know what I mean? I said, "I'll be damned." And it was him. And it's like, if you would have changed, because he had a distinctive nose, flared nostrils, very distinctive nose. I've never seen another nose like it. I said, if you would have gotten a nose job, I would have never recognized you,
Oh,
because he looked very different at that time. Because like when he was experimenting on me, he was very distinguished looking, like a salt and pepper beard. I remember he used to smoke a pipe with cherry tobacco and listen to jazz music. So he looked very different. Now he was clean and shaving, and it looked like he had like lightened his hair, but his nose, the nose, yeah, that nose was very distinctive. And he was basically, "Okay, well, you caught me.
and did you
So yeah,
did you end up talking to him at all?
yeah, very, very briefly, but it was a little, I mean, I wasn't really scared of him per se, but it was just a little awkward, because I was a young mother, I had a small child, and it's like, what the heck, why the heck are you here? I'm a grown woman, I'm a grown woman now.
Did you ever keep in touch with him after that, or was that the last time you ever saw him?
No, they, just between you and me and the fence post, they said he died in 1984. Not so. He died in his 90s here in Palm Beach in recent years. Yeah, yeah. He died. Yeah, they reportedly said he died in 84, but I know for a fact he died here in Palm Beach in his 90s in recent years. And, you know, he owned a business, you know, that's what the CIA loves to do. They love to take on different personalities. They like to, you know, reimagine themselves into different roles. They like to wear costumes, hyper realistic masks. They're Machiavellian, you know what I mean? I think most of them, I think most of the people in the CIA are dark triad personalities, honestly.
That's why too, and not to like, take away from if somebody actually does die or something happens to them, but I always wonder that when I hear about these deaths of really high profile people that were kind of in the spotlight, did they really die or are they, like you said, being reimagined and sort of taken out of one role and then whoop, we're going to funnel you here. You're going to be this person
Yeah.
now. This is your new place in the world. This is your new identity. They do that. It's like watching a play.
They get a big kick out of it, and that is their spice of life. Absolutely.
Oh my goodness. And so after you became a mother, when did your memories start coming back or when did you start realizing what you went through?
Um, my parents died in 1995, and they were my primary handlers. And I had gotten into a very bad car accident, as my friend she explained. My best friend, explained it to me. She goes, "So you spiraled out of control because your handlers were dead, right?" And I said, "That's a good way to put it. That's exactly what happened." So I had been at I was an accounting manager in a big company then. We had had a Christmas party. I had too many, rum and eggnogs. And I usually didn't drive drunk, but this night I did because I felt like I could. And I started to lose consciousness. I crashed through a guardrail at a college in our town, and I was like teetering precariously on the edge of the canal bank. And the police and the fire rescue showed up, and my head had hit the windshield. My head was like full of shards of glass, like I almost died. When they treated me in the hospital, then they took me to the county jail, and I had to go through a victim impact panel and drug treatment for a year. And then I couldn't drive that year, and I was sitting on a park bench one day, waiting for a bus to go to work, and a friend of our family, who was coincidentally also called Carol, she was married to one of my husband's friends. She sat down and she whispered in my ear, and she goes, "Hey, by the way, you looked really good in those movies back in the day." And my head exploded. I go, "Holy You know what I mean? It was like the proverbial snake in a can, like the lid blew off. And I had just like sublimated all those memories. I guess I don't really call it disassociation. Now that I've researched Project Bluebird more, which was a main part of my programming, I call it an amnesic barrier. That's what I call it. And so I started going to the library and researching government experimentation, satanic ritual abuse, and all that, and human trafficking. I started calling all around the country. I got in touch with a gentleman by the name of Dr. Preston Bailey, who runs the Tampa Baptist Church. He happens to be a deprogrammer. He helped me with my deprogramming. Then he introduced me to his friend, who is a gentleman by the name of Wendell Amstutz. He's also a deprogrammer, and he runs a television station in Rochester, Minnesota. So they were the two fairy godfathers who started the ball rolling with my deprogramming.
When you found out that you were a multiple, how did that affect your life when you realized, wow, I'm not alone in my body? And what was that like, sort of deprogramming from that and or integrating and or just creating cohesion? Because that had to have been pretty chaotic in your life.
It started to make me feel very destabilized, like I shouldn't go out of the house because I might do something crazy, like the lady in red incident. You know, I didn't realize, I didn't know that I had all this hardware in my head at that time, obviously. And I didn't know that like I could they literally have the codes to my frequencies for my steam receiver, so they can like commandeer me or drive me around like a remote control car, basically. I mean, just, to put it in very simple terms, I mean, that's what they've done.
Oh my goodness. And were there other things that you tried that were really helpful on your healing journey?
Yeah. I've been involved in the Center for Family Services here in Palm Beach for 22 years. And I've availed myself of the VOCA grant, Victims of Violent Crimes. And they've paid for 100% of my very expensive surgery, or not surgery, therapy, I should say. Got surgery here. So yeah, that's been a great resource, and I always advocate for that. It's also on my Facebook page as far as all of the details on how you can take advantage of that.
When you started to remember and recall your memories and have these different compartments open up so you could see what your life actually was, what was the response from people in your life? Did you go to your parents and tell them? Did you ever ask your parents or people in your life, your siblings? And what was sort of the response to that as you were going through this realization?
Everybody panicked because everybody had directives to keep me under control, whether they were cult family members, whether they were handlers, whatever their role was. Everybody started to panic, and they would like actually deliver 6 packs of beer to my door when I was trying to quit drinking, so that they could keep me under control. Yeah, they were very, very sneaky and very vicious to try to keep me. The last thing they wanted is for me to, discover all that had been done, because they knew that I was going to go ballistic.
So, what motivated you to want to then take the next step to speak out and go public about this? And what was your journey into that?
Well, I guess it was 2003, and my relatives in Finland had gotten wind that I was waking up from my programming and starting to get into activism. So they contacted my next door neighbor, to find out how I was doing. And she called me up, and I'm like, well, why is my uncle, my chemist, Finnish parliamentarian uncle contacting you? She goes, well, um, they're just curious about you since your parents died, and they would like for you to come to Finland so you could meet, your whole family. I mean, our family in Finland and Sweden, there's like 100 of us, from because my father came from a family of 11. So imagine how that's branched out, and since the 19 early 1900s, I guess. So I thought about it for a little while, and I was like, okay, well, I don't really want to go to Finland because I have a small child. And they're like, oh, no, you must go, and we're going to pay for everything. So they basically invited me to Finland, and we're driving through southern Finland, going from house to house. And then finally, when we got out to the Viking Islands archipelago, which is off of Turku, Finland, it's in southern Finland. When we were at the summer cottage, like 60 miles from civilization, my aunt and my uncle told me, like, as the sun was going down, that if I didn't shut my mouth, with the activism, I was going to find myself in a big predicament. So, I knew that they were threatening me. My child was 4 then. So we retired to the bedroom. I called my daughter back in Florida. I told her to book me a flight out of Helsinki, and we ran out. We ran out like in the middle of the night, fearing for our lives. And my aunt like emerges from the bedroom naked and crying, saying, "Oh my God, Carolina, why are you leaving?" I go, "The baby misses her daddy." I said, "We're going back to the States. Thank you for your hospitality, and bye." And we ran out to the waiting cab. We took a bus to Helsinki airport. And then 12 hours later, we were back in Miami, and I was breathing a sigh of relief.
Oh my gosh, that sounds so terrifying and just like a lot to manage on top of everything else that you're going through. It's really sad
Yeah,
that survivors don't have really stability even after they wake up to everything. It like destabilizes their life now in a different way, and all these other different things start happening to them. So after that, when did you decide to write a book? And can you talk about your first book that you made? I know that you're in the process of writing a second one, but what inspired you to want to make a book? And let's talk about that project and then sort of how it's evolving today.
Well, in 2018, I made the documentary, and that was like a catharsis for me, to get the word out. It wasn't only good for me. I knew that it would be good for other people too, because I suspected there must be many other people like myself. And so that was really good. And then, of course, the ladies in the UN, they've written their own book and they inspired me, to write my book. And then Escape from Palm Beach was released in November of 2021. We released it locally. As I said, I had a lot of trepidation, about laying my story bare to the public. So we got a good response, and then, my father's mistress, I met her through property management again after like 50 years. I had not seen her. And she clued me in on some of the other things and how my father got forced into the OSS/CIA. And so that inspired me to, write the prequel. And of course, now that, I've uncovered my brain implants, it's gonna make one hell of a book.
Do you have any idea when tentatively that might be out? And then where maybe it will end up being? I'll help promote it whenever it comes out, but I just want to get it on people's radar.
Yeah, I'm working with my editor now. I have a very good editor. Her name is Mary Kay Bates. She was actually the right-hand gal for Tennessee Williams, the famous playwright Tennessee Williams, when he lived in Key West in the 80s. And I was interviewing editors and I just came across her online, and she had 5 stars, and she goes, "Yeah, I used to work for Tennessee Williams." And it's like, damn, I hit the jackpot. So I'm very happy to have a good editor that can kind of guide me, as a novice writer. And and I know it's going to be a good book. And I guess the long-term goal is we'd like to make a film out of it. And even if it's a short indie film, I'd even be happy with going to the Sundance Festival. That would be like the cherry on the sundae for me.
100%. That's really exciting. And, thank you from all of us for pouring your heart and soul into this and sharing all these really traumatic things that I'm sure are really difficult to keep reliving and talking about and reading and making sure that they're said perfectly and doing all these interviews. We really underestimate the courage it takes for someone to talk about these not just heinous abuses, but just the most vulnerable, difficult times in your life. So many times in life, we have conversations about how are you doing? We're doing good. This is happening, and the weather's great. And it's really underestimated how important it is to also talk about our trauma, and to help each other heal through our stories and to realize that we're all puzzle pieces and that this is the stuff that unites us. It's not always the good stuff. Sometimes our struggles can teach us a lot more and teach other people a lot more than the things that were really easy in life or the really happy moments. And I know your testimony, not just here, but with these incredible projects that you're working on, this book, these are they're gonna span the test of time. There'll be people for generations reading how you overcame all of this and what our history actually was versus what they told us it was. So just thank you, Carol, for all the time that you're taking to do all of this. I'm really, really excited.
Yeah, yeah, it's my pleasure. I feel like it's my self-appointed duty, to get the word out because, like I said, I'm an escape piece of equipment. I'm the one that got away. Nobody was ever supposed to know about this, and I think it's time that the public knew about what the government used our tax dollars and government grants to commit these crimes against humanity and these dirty deeds.
Did you ever confront your parents or ask them about it or share? What was sort of their take on this later on in life as you were coming to terms with this?
My parents passed away before the memory sublimated. That was
Mm,
actually the catalyst. That was the catalyst for me when they died, and my programming spiraled out of control because nobody was maintaining it. And my tertiary handler was my husband, but he was never home, so that wasn't really working. So I spiraled out of control, and that's kind of what brought me to my healing to my healing process. God forgive me. I mean, even after everything, I love my parents very much, and I cried for a whole year because they both passed away in 1995. And I'm a Christian, and I've forgiven them. I know that they were between a rock and a hard place. They were basically blackmailed, and from what I can gather, we were political prisoners. So that's why I always cite the first four articles of the Geneva Convention, which prohibits torture, mutilation, unnecessary medical treatments, and it talks a lot about bioethics. We were political prisoners. There's no doubt about it. Because they did this all, they did this all under the cover of darkness, and it was all clandestine. And my father was coerced into doing all these things and then absorbing our family into the intelligence agencies.
Man, I can't even imagine being put in that position, and having to contend with all of that and having kids, and that had to have just been a really, really difficult time for your family, and I think that's really beautiful that you've been able to come to a place of peace. I don't know if that means forgiveness, but that peace, inner peace, and just being able to not carry that heavy weight is so important, because this stuff can get so heavy to indulge in and to think about, and all the rage that can be inside from how many perpetrators and people that kind of looked away or didn't understand or didn't intervene to help, all these people that should have been protecting you. And it's not to dismiss what happened or to say that, all these people are just innocent, but to realize what people go through to either become a perpetrator. Children aren't born perpetrators. They're taught that, they're programmed to be. And so again, it doesn't excuse it. It doesn't say it's okay to be a perpetrator because they went through torture. But to have an understanding about it, we can start to unwind this, figure out how it happens and how to prevent it from happening instead
Mhm.
of just hating people automatically and having that be the only thing that we indulge in. We also have to be able to reverse engineer this and figure out how to stop it and how to not have this happen anymore. And for people who have gone through it like you, how to help them when they come out of it and say, "Hey, I've perpetrated. I don't want to do it anymore. I want to be free of this. I don't want to live in a world of perpetration and violence and, programming
Mhm.
and pain. I want to come out and experience the opposite of that. We have to be
Right.
understanding. Like, I want everybody in these systems. I wish your parents would have got out and, been able to do what you've done. It's really sad, all the people that, like, kind of live a life and never really like get to that point of contending with things or healing from it, and to have gone through what they did and what you did. It's really beautiful to see you sitting here smiling and strong, being able to tell this story with integrity and, love in your heart still despite all the horror that you went through, creating books. You're an absolute walking miracle and an inspiration.
Thanks so much. Did I send you the newspaper article about when I was kidnapped in 1976?
Let me check. There were a few more photos in here. So let's flow through them. Was it this one?
Yeah, yeah, that's when me and my friends, after the traffickers were very mad about me going into the caving society and basically, escaping and kind of doing something, useful with my life. So my friends and I started out to a bluegrass festival in August of 1976. And of course, we're typical hippies. We hitchhiked everywhere because we didn't have cars. And this Econoline van happened along, and it was two guys in their mid to late 20s, and they're like, "Are you going to the festival?" And we said yes. And then they said, "We'll hop in, we'll take you over there, or whatever." And then a few minutes into the conversation, the passenger was sitting in one of those bucket seats that swivel, and he turned a snub nose 38 at the three of us. And he said, "Okay, well, your little friend there ran away from some people, and we've come to get her. And if you cooperate, nobody gets hurt." So they drove us up into the Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina. I think we were on the road for about 10 or 12 hours. They stopped for hamburgers. Apparently, they laced the hamburgers with either LSD or orange sunshine. So we started to have hallucinations about 30 minutes after we consumed them. And then it was probably about 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. I think we were getting close to our destination because they came to like a slow roll. They're probably going 10 miles an hour or less. And the passenger turned to the driver because I think they were trying to find the turnoff where they were going to take us. And while he was talking to the driver, our guy friend, there was three of us, me and my two friends, our guy friend said, "On the count of three, you all, 1, 2, 3." And he slid open the door on the van. He pushed us down the mountain, and he saw a briar patch, which is a big thorn bush. And he goes, "We're gonna go hide in this briar patch, so hopefully they won't be able to find us." And it's like, "Well, how do you know they're coming back?" He goes, "I just know that." He goes, "Because we were close to their destination, and they're gonna be coming back with more men and more guns." So we climbed into the briar patch, got all scratched up, excuse me. And about 30 minutes later, sure enough, just like our friend said, there was about a dozen guys with bloodhounds and shotguns circling the briar patch. They kept looking and looking for hours, and then dawn was breaking. Finally, the leader of the group said, "There's no way that they're in that briar patch. That would kill them. Let's go down to that stand of trees over there. They're probably hiding in there." So, they finally left, and we climbed out of the briar patch, climbed back up the mountain. We were walking for a while. A cop came along. He made us sit in the back of the cruiser, questioned us. He found out that we were the abducted teenagers from Florida. And then they set up child services on North Carolina, set us up in a safe house. And then they arranged, for us to be flown back to Florida a couple days later.
Oh my goodness. How did that impact you as a child? I mean, you're still pretty young here, and
Yeah,
having this
I was
written up
14.
in like
Yeah, I
a
was 14. Yeah, 14. Yeah. Yeah, I couldn't go anywhere because it was a big scandal, and I couldn't go to school. I couldn't go anywhere because people were like saying, "Oh, you were in the newspaper," or whatever. So I just kind of laid low for a while. And I was tutored at home and stuff. And then I eventually ended up getting my GED because I just couldn't take all the notoriety.
Wow, that's crazy. But I mean, that's really awesome that you have this evidence here to show something that you went through and that it was actually published instead of something that was just brushed under the rug. You actually got recognition, for
Right.
this, even though it was something that, I'm sure you didn't want to be recognized for and a horrible thing to happen. Really validating though to show all the evidence that you have.
Right. Well, and it's on my Facebook page. I actually have the article when the kingpins of the human trafficking ring were busted, but they were finally busted on unrelated charges like nearly 30 years later. And it was a Supreme Court judge, a cop, and a lawyer. And they were a member of a subgroup of the Freemasons called the Royal Order of the Jesters. And they were, if you pull up the Royal Order of the Jesters, human trafficking, it'll bring up how they were trafficking kids from Brazil, basically from all over the world. So those were the same people who were running the child trafficking ring, back in my day, nearly 30 years prior.
Oh my gosh. And can you talk just a little bit about the secret society side of things? That seems to be really tied into the MK Ultra, satanic ritual abuse, occult family stories. And I think it's again validating that this is a part of your story too.
Yeah, well, I'm just going to call it tentacles all on the same octopus. Like, I understand that once you get to become a 33rd degree Mason, then you can branch out and join all these other elite groups and kind of, climb the ladders of success, Skull and Bones, the Council of 13. I mean, it goes up and up and up. I mean, there's groups up there that we've never even heard of, and they're, we'll probably never even know about them. But yeah, I understand that being a 33rd degree Mason is like the springboard to kind of take you in different directions. And that's how you get into the jesters too. And you only get into the Royal Order of the Jesters by invitation if you're a Mason in good standing.
In your experience, was it every Mason at that level is sort of bound to participate in this, or did you meet
I,
people
I
that
don't I don't think so. I'm not going to go so far as to say that all Masons are bad. I think there's rogues in every organization. I worked in property management here in Palm Beach for 25 years. I met some what I would think were upstanding Masons, but there's going to be rogue factions in every organization.
for sure? Thank you for sharing that. That's validating for other survivors who had that in their family or, were trafficked through lodges or just through that network, I suppose. It's interesting how all
Mhm,
these things go together like a puzzle and there's different
mhm.
extensions of how this happens and seeing how it all orchestrates together. It's amazing and terrifying at the same time. It's mind-blowing that we drive by these places and we think all these things operate so separately and we don't realize how closely intertwined so many factions of society are underneath our noses and the things that they're able to do with all the power that they've amassed. Was there anything else from your story that you wanted to share today that we didn't get to?
No, I just want to, thank the community out there. I know that there's a lot of cross section of the people that I've interacted with, Silky Southern Tea. I know that a lot of them watch your channel too. And, I just wanted to send my love and thanks to, everybody that supported me in my journey and do, support your local human trafficking shelters, with donations or donating your time, any way that you can help, um, really means a lot.
And as far as keeping up with you, like I said, I'd love to have you back on and we can, talk about your book and I'd love to help promote that whenever it comes out. But in the
Mhm.
meantime, I know that you're on social media a little bit. Do you want to share how people can get in touch with you if they just want to follow or if they want to reach out, and message you?
Yeah, I'm on Facebook under Carol Stanhope, human rights activist.
And so you guys can find her here. And then you said you were also on YouTube?
Yeah, it's under Escape from Palm Beach.
Okay, and so people can find you there, and then I will have those linked in the show notes for people. That's a really great and easy way to support survivors is just to subscribe or follow them or friend them. I think one thing the enemy doesn't expect a lot of times when they choose victims they think are vulnerable, and I think it's really beautiful when the victim becomes the victor, and they finally get eyes on them, they get support from people. It's sort of a backhanded revenge in a sense to just say, hey, I'm doing well, like you didn't destroy me, I'm not on the streets homeless and a drug addict, which is so sad that that happens to so many people that have been abused, and the weight that you carry, Carol, like I said, all the people that you're speaking for and on behalf who don't have the opportunity to write books and do podcasts and who didn't come to the other side, and just your family, being able to heal that part and to not pass that down, and to be able to go through that journey of mending yourself and understanding what you went through and not have all this hate in your heart, and to pass that on to the next generation. It's amazing what you've been able to do, Carol, and I just want to commend you and celebrate you and just thank you from the bottom of my heart for coming on here and for sharing all of these memories and your testimony with us today.
Oh, you're quite welcome. It was my pleasure. And, you really an anointed, spirit-filled sister. You really have the leadings of the Holy Spirit, my dear.
I feel that with you too. We see that in each other because we both have it, and I think everybody's gonna really get a lot out of this testimony. There's a lot of puzzle pieces, and it's just amazing to me how we're taught history and we really aren't taught to question it. And it's so harrowing just to hear how things actually were and to think that this stuff is still happening today, whether it's the same as things that you went through or if it's evolved. I'm sure there's a mix of that, but this is why it's important to share this because we're talking on behalf too of the kids and still in these systems and programs today. And your work is so important, Carol. So thank you for coming on. And like I said, everybody, I'll have Carol's links in the show notes. Go give her a follow. Let's show the enemy that we have eyes on her, that we support her, we lift her up, and that any retaliation will be rebuked. And they're not going to get away with anything, which hopefully, Carol, you're not experiencing that, but I know the road does get rocky, whether it's in the spiritual realm or physical. So I ask everybody to please pray over Carol, pray over her family and her journey, her new book, pray for her safety and for her continued healing and for her continued courage. And just that, we keep uncovering these puzzle pieces one at a time and plugging them in. And, one day at a time, we expose this once and for all so we can put a stop to it. So I'll have all that in the show notes, you guys. Thank you guys for listening as always. God bless you, and we will see you next time.